diaperperv.
Hi, it's JayBDL.
And today we are going to have a discussion about abdl fantasy versus reality.
Yeah, so a lot of times you get into a situation where you have a particular fantasy and you have an idea of how it's going to play out and what it's going to feel like. And sometimes when you finally get to explore that, the reality doesn't match up.
No, or yeah, and you're disappointed afterwards, or you feel like, and then you question, like, did I really want this thing? Why did I want it so bad when I don't feel fulfilled, or I expected something magical to happen and it didn't happen? Like, fireworks are supposed to go off, and I'm supposed to feel, I don't know what, like fulfilled in every way possible, emotionally and psychologically, and then you're just kind of disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of the first time I've tried a few things and you go through the experience and you come out of it and you're like, this wasn't what I thought it would be. It was something completely different. Like, you have this expectation in your head that you're going to feel certain emotions or certain sensations.
Right.
And that it's going to trigger certain feelings beyond that in yourself. And then you get down to the end of it, and when it's all said and done, you feel like none of that happened, and it's very disappointing, and it makes you feel like, okay, well, do I question everything else that I hold as things that I enjoy now?
So, okay, so is a possible explanation about this? Look, he's chasing a squirrel.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness! Oh, that was so cute!
Squirrel!
Yeah. Is a possible explanation of this you're going through trauma after the experience?
That could be part of it, but oftentimes you'll feel it even in the moment of the experience that, this isn't really matching up with what I wanted it to be. This is, it's not feeling like I want it to feel.
And I think in your fantasies, especially if you're fapping to your fantasies, then you are feeling your feelings alone in what you think it might feel like. And then you have the fantasy, like you're watching the video or reading the story, and you're so focused on your own emotions, on what you think it would be.
Yes, and you start to project certain emotions that you feel are supposed to come along with what this is that you're fantasizing about or thinking about. And then when the reality happens, it's not in the same environment or situation or conditions, and all of a sudden it's completely different because it's not what you were doing before.
Right, and also because you're interacting with another person at that point, and sometimes you're not used to that, or you compare what you want in your fantasy, and you're like, oh, well, now my caregiver isn't doing this thing, and you're so focused on it. You're like, oh, the super tapes are all messed up, they're not perfectly asymmetrical, and then you're so focused on that you're not in the moment. So focused on the details. You're like, oh my goodness, my fantasy, the tapes are on perfect, and my caregiver knows how to do everything super perfectly.
2 puffs of baby powder, not 3. That's just excessive.
Yeah. And I've had clients stop me in the middle of stuff and correct me or say, okay, I want it this way or that way, and I think it does pull you out of the fantasy in some ways. But I think it really does have to do with your expectations and what you expect and how much you expect. Because especially if you've had them for a long time, you've had your fantasies for so long, and it's so specific that you can't bend the rules a little bit or relax on how you want your fantasy.
Yeah, and I feel like when people talk about a fantasy, they have a scenario in mind. They have a scene. Okay, there will be diapers. There's going to be maybe a little mobile or a bottle or any number of things. But they focus so much on the physical elements that they forget what they're really going for is more of an emotional element, emotional scene.
Yes.
And that's where I think the disconnect happens. So you have your fantasy scene with somebody, and there's a bottle, and there's diapers, and maybe there's mittens or a bonnet or whatever your fantasy is. And
they're just elements. They're just physical things that don't equate to like the whole overall feeling of what you want.
Yeah, maybe what you really wanted as part of those elements in your fantasy was that feeling of nurturing and caring, Or maybe your elements were all about forced regression.
Or embarrassment.
Yeah.
And not humiliation, or humiliation and not embarrassment. And
Yeah.
there are things, I mean, these are things that kind of overlap. Or you can have more than one element, and sometimes you don't want all the elements, you just want certain ones.
Exactly.
Or you think you know what you want, but you really don't.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why when you're having a scene, you mentioned that you want to keep things open-ended so you can go with the flow.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, because we were talking about, like, my intake form or whatever. Like, when people would book a session with me, then it wasn't a questionnaire. Like, I see some caregivers have a very, very specific questionnaire. Like, this element, this thing, how do you want it? And you have to, like, tick a box. And mine was just an open-ended question. What would you like to experience with me? That was it. Describe what your ideal experience would be like. And I kept it open-ended for a reason. And even if they weren't very specific in their elements and stuff, I found, like, when they got to me, when they get to my place and they're in front of me, I can ask them all the specifics, and it's a lot quicker that way.
Yeah.
And then I can elaborate or ask them more questions if I think I need clarification.
So how do you figure out what sensation or emotions a client wants from a scene?
I ask them.
Okay. But
But other than that, then I take the elements when I ask all the questions on, like, creating your own fantasy, and I guess, and then I verbalize my guess, and then we can talk about it then. They can, like, confirm or deny it.
Okay.
Or if I think I have a good idea, I'll, like, verbally confirm it, and if they confirm it with me, and then I just do it, and then I'm reacting to them. That's all I'm doing.
Do you think it's more helpful when you have a client who has a very specific scene in mind and, like, lays it out for you, versus somebody who may not have the specifics but has more of an idea of how they want to feel?
I mean, they're both really different things, and you're both in both instances, you're just trying to create that fantasy for them. So I think I do fine with both.
Okay.
Like, both is totally organic. But it's more of a hit and miss, I think, when a feeling... It's helpful when I see them reacting to me. When there's feedback as themselves in the role. Like, whether they snuggle up to me or they hug me, or I can clearly tell they're having fun through their words and actions and smiles, and then, like, a blank.
Gotcha.
Yes. And sometimes that's harder with humiliation, if it's, like, something that doesn't involve humiliation, because when you're being humiliated, you're pretty quiet about it. You're pretty silent. So then I'm just reading them from that and hoping that this is what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it helps if there's more feedback from them, like more pushback. Like, if they want it more harsh, there should be more pushback so I can go harder.
Gotcha.
So I can go firmer. So if you're, like, if you're having a scene with someone, just react to them. Like, if you want them to go harder, push harder.
I think that's really important, because in some of the scenes that I've had myself, where I've come away maybe feeling a little disappointed,
Yeah.
I always worried about pushing back. I always felt like if I push back, they're going to just stop the scene.
Really? Okay.
And I think that's a really important point, that if you want a scene that has more of a forced aspect,
Yeah.
or a scene that is more of a punishment aspect, that you need to react genuinely in your feelings.
Yeah.
Even though it's a scene, you need to have that more genuine reaction if you want it to keep going.
Because if you have the genuine reaction, then you're believing it.
Yeah.
You're believing in the fantasy, and that way the reality is closer to your fantasy, I guess.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's a big part of it, is self-belief. You make it feel real.
Yes.
Because No, we're not all having that fantasy of, somebody's abducted us and is putting us in diapers and regressing us back. Yes, you have that fantasy, but let's be real, that's not what's happening.
No.
Is you're playing with somebody and you're pretending for this to happen.
Yeah.
And if you let yourself believe it's only pretend, then you might not get the same enjoyment out of it as if you lean into it and really believe into it.
That's good, leaning into it.
Yeah.
So I guess you have to fully immerse yourself in your head.
Yeah.
And through your actions too. Like if you want mommy's love and approval, you have to give that love to get it back.
Yeah.
You have to be vulnerable and, cuddle up to your daddy or mommy or whoever, caregiver, big brother, whatever, and say stuff and do stuff so then they can show you that they love you or they care about you.
Yeah, the people I think who get the most out of any of their scenes or their age play, whatever play they're into, are the ones that are just very genuine and heartfelt about their own emotions and actions in that moment. So the ones, like you said, that cuddle, that snuggle.
Yeah, if you want that loving, that loving caregiver type role, then if you're just lying there like a cold noodle and you expect them to do everything, then it's not going to be as good as if you hug them or, grab onto their leg or grab onto their arm and do the things to show affection.
So if you want to make your fantasy, or if you want to help your fantasy meet your expectations, if you want that reality to be more like your fantasy, just like Santa Claus, you gotta believe.
Okay,
that was a bad line. But it's just
you have to believe in the great pumpkin.
You have to believe. That's more appropriate. That's more diaper perv appropriate. You have to believe Charlie Brown. You have to believe you're going to see that great pumpkin, and when it rises, it's going to be the best thing ever. Because if you just convince yourself it's something else, then that's all it's going to be.
So, let's see. Do we have any tips for people to lean into that fantasy and to be able to suspend their disbelief easier?
Well, some people naturally are better at that than others. For those that have a harder time doing that, then you need to start looking at ways to relax and let go of control and just live in that moment. And I know it's easy to say, but it's hard to do.
It is.
A lot of times it's going to take a lot of trust and feeling comfortable and safe in where you are.
Ooh, that's good.
And working up to that moment, working up to that feeling. It's not going to always happen overnight for some folks. But just don't give up either. Don't feel like it didn't happen the first time I had this scene. It's never going to happen. My fantasy is junk.
Yes. And I've had people tell me that, I met a girl and she was into diapers too. We met, on a kink site and we diapered each other and I didn't feel everything I thought it would feel like. And maybe this isn't what I want.
Yeah.
Or why do I want this? And then they second guess themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what to say other than that was just one experience. Maybe you weren't into them emotionally. Maybe it would be different if it was your girlfriend or husband or boyfriend.
Yep.
Or someone who you had a real emotional connection with instead of someone you just met or just went on a couple dates with or whatever. It makes a huge difference.
You already have that huge barrier of getting to know somebody that's getting in the way, and then trying to mix this in on top of it. It's going to be tough.
Yeah. And maybe some people aren't predisposed to having those feelings with strangers. Yeah.
And just because, you had one negative experience does not rule out that experience will always be negative. Or not even negative, just a not positive experience.
Right.
Or
not life-changing, mind-blowing fireworks experience.
Yeah. So you have to ask yourself after these experiences, when you're questioning your fantasy and questioning what you like, what was missing from the experience? And don't think about just the physical aspects like, well, the diaper wasn't pink. Okay, whatever. What were the emotional aspects that were missing for you? What would have made that a more complete scenario? So to use your guy as an example, maybe it was that there was no emotional connection between the two of them, and that's why it didn't feel that way. He had this idea that diapering another girl and being diapered by a girl would be a much closer, more intimate feeling instead of a cold transactional one.
Yes, yeah, because I think they had just met, and it wasn't someone he would normally date. Like, they didn't have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be it. If it's someone you're truly attracted to outside of diapers, then it's going to be like a lot more special.
Exactly. And that's going to be a big part of it is, you know, sometimes your scene is a lot to do with the people you're playing with. Because if maybe you're getting into it and leaning into it and like what you want, but if the other person isn't, man, it's not going to be as fulfilling.
Yeah, that's true. So let's talk about the times that you've been disappointed when playing with someone or doing a scene with someone.
Yeah, it's happened somewhat recently where a scene I was doing, I just didn't feel connected. Like, I felt very disconnected from the whole event. But a lot of it is I wanted to try something new, and I went to somebody that I trusted to help me with this experience, to be a partner in the scene. And through no fault of their own. You know, we don't normally play with each other. It just didn't click or feel like I wanted to. And I had to stop and think about, like, do I really want this type of play? Is this really not for me? Did I try it and I just genuinely don't like it? Or was it this scene? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, no, it was just this scene. There are aspects, emotional aspects that were not met. And I did not communicate those well, maybe because I didn't understand what I was asking for.
Yes.
And if I were to circle back and do it again, absolutely I would do it differently and ask for different things. Okay. And maybe even have a different partner who is able to engage more on that level. Okay,
I see. So this person did the acts, right?
They did what I asked them to do, which was fine. But their heart wasn't in it. They were just helping me.
Right.
Which was fine.
And you knew that the whole time. Like,
that's what I went in with. That was the whole idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course, when you do it like that, it's not always going to be the same.
And she wasn't, like, hot diaper talking you. Or,
no.
That type of verbal.
No, it was very business-like affair.
Right. Like, I'm doing this thing. Yeah. Okay, it's done.
Yeah, which is, like, kind of what I asked for and how I approached it.
Yeah.
And that was on me. Like I said, I need to communicate better, and we all need to communicate better if we're trying to enact a fantasy, what we want to experience.
And I think that's hard for people because, number one, a lot of people that haven't experienced playing with another person, they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
All they have are fantasies. And number two, it involves being emotionally vulnerable. To say, oh, I want to feel this, and then letting yourself feel it.
Exactly. So, yeah, you need to be able to be, you said vulnerable. I'm sorry, I'm repeating you now.
But that's scary, though.
Yeah.
That's really scary for a lot of people.
It's easier to say, I just want to be diapered, not to say, I want to feel vulnerable and gently humiliated for having to wear my diapers and reminded that I need diapers. And I want to have that feeling of powerlessness. Mm-hmm. That's a lot deeper than just saying, I want a diaper change.
Yes. No, that's so true. Yeah. So, do you think to do that, you need to, like, know yourself or be comfortable with your emotions? I don't know.
I think you need to take a deeper recognition of what emotions you experience when you have your fantasies. And then how you can replicate those emotions in a scene. And you need to talk to your partner about what emotions you want to feel. Not just, can you put a diaper on me, but, I want to feel small and helpless when you diaper me.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Yes. I want to feel X, Y, Z.
Yes, and I think, like, in my times as a professional caregiver, when they say that, that's way more helpful than any other thing. Like, anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you'll have a more indulging or more rewarding experience. Mm-hmm. And even if you still feel like it didn't tick all the boxes, remember, part of that is going to be your own apprehension if you're new at this. Mm-hmm. If you've been doing this a longer time, then you'll probably be much more comfortable with it, and it will feel more rewarding to you.
Yeah, and non-transactional. And I think that just goes with like trust
Mm-hmm.
and clicking with someone. Like sometimes you just don't click with the
Mm-hmm.
other person, or the other person is too transactional.
Yes, and sometimes that's okay.
Yeah.
Like when you and I first met, it was a purely transactional. Do you want a diaper change? Yes, okay, let's have a diaper change. But if it was something where I was seeking something more or you were seeking something more, that needs to be communicated.
Right.
And then you could say, well, I'd like to change your diaper, but I want to make you feel like a little baby, or I want to give you gentle humiliation, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Now we're going to go into Spirit Halloween and look for adult baby stuff for a different episode.
Yep. So remember, your fantasies can be made reality. It is going to take some work.
Yeah.
And you need to really dig into the emotional aspect of it, not just the scene and physical aspect of it. What do you want to feel should be a bigger priority over what do you want to experience.
And lean into it.
Yes.
And I know that's scary.
Yes. All right. Bye.